Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. We're going to go through another FRQ for AP Human Geography. This one is on Boomburbs and other suburbanization concepts and city concepts that we've been discussing in Unit 6. Here, if you want to practice the FRQ, the link is in the description down below. You can go ahead and give it a try and use this video to grade yourself, or you could use this video to learn some of the concepts being assessed here on this FRQ. Perfect. So let's just jump straight in with this. So part A is a definition question. You'll have maybe one or two of those on your exam. This one is to define what a boomburb is. So we learned about a lot of different settlement patterns in particularly the United States that develop as a result of urban sprawl and suburban sprawl. We learned about, of course, urban cities with the central business district. We learned about suburbs. We learned about exurbs. We learned about edge cities. And we also learned about boomburbs. And these are concepts that are commonly confused by students. We're going to try to clear this up near the end of the video, but let's focus on boomburbs. And what is a boomburb? Well, a great definition of a boomburb is a rapidly growing residential area. It would have been all right if you said a rapidly growing suburb that is experiencing population growth similar to that of a city. So that's what makes a boomburb different from a suburb. A boomburb and a suburb are very similar in what's located there. We have a lot of residential areas. We also have some businesses and some places that can spur up the local economy. However, the difference is that boomburbs are experiencing city-like population growth, and we see a lot more political and cultural influence as a result. Some other things you could have said is that you could say it's a suburban area that's grown quickly in population. We see a lot of infrastructure growth to support the population as well as economic activity because the population has to have jobs. When they have jobs, they're going to earn income, which will contribute to the GDP and to the economy. But they also maintain some of the suburban characteristics. They're not turning into a city per se. They're still maintaining a lot of that suburban character because that's a very large suburb that's expanded in population. Notice how all three of these responses have indicated that there's been population growth. So that's something critical that should have been in your response here. And it could be considered it's becoming a more urban-like center in its own right, but it's still considered a suburb here. So we still have those distinctiveness, oh my gosh, in those concepts here. Let's move on to part B. Explain one way that residential facilities in Chesapeake are affected by its status as a boomburb. So we're not given a lot of information here. All we know is that Chesapeake is in Virginia, and we know it's a boomburb. That's really it. So what you have to use to answer this question is just your own knowledge from your own brain on what is considered a part of a boomburb. What are the characteristics of different boomburbs? And we're looking at residential facilities. And something to keep in mind here is that we know the population growth is very strong in boomburbs. It's urban-like population growth. So how is that going to influence residential facilities? How's that going to impact the infrastructure development? What about the scarcity for homes? So look at some example responses here. So the rapid growth in Chesapeake has led to demand for housing. You have all these people coming in, they have to live somewhere. So that's a lot of demand for housing. So that's going to result in the construction of new residential facilities, such as single-family homes, apartment complexes, townhouses, all of these to accommodate the expanding population here. And we know that apartment complexes can usually hold more people than single-family homes in neighborhoods. So it would have been all right if you said that they built more apartment complexes or townhomes and said that they built less single-family homes. But if you said any of those things, that would be all right as well. As a boomburb, Chesapeake may experience gentrification. That's something that we could see as well, where older residential areas are going to be redeveloped to attract higher income residents. And that will usually result in the displacement of lower income communities as that standard and cost of living go up. We could have also said that the development of new residential areas is accompanied by the creation of new amenities that we see in suburbs, such as parks, shopping centers. Malls used to be a big thing in suburbs. Now we see a lot more outdoor plazas and outdoor outlet malls in suburbs as well. We're also, of course, going to see the creation of new schools as well. And that will change the sense of place. It'll change the design and layout of the city. It'll also change the residential facilities to meet the needs of the growing populations. In the suburb that's near me, they're building schools in neighborhoods now. The neighborhoods are so big that they're building schools inside the neighborhoods, which is not something that I'm used to seeing. So maybe it is where you're from, but it's not something I'm used to seeing. So that's one example of a very specific change that could occur in a boomburb as a result of such population growth impacting the residential facilities. Our final response will be the increased demand for housing can lead to higher property values, making it more difficult for low and middle income families. This is basic economic principles, is that when you have a lot of scarcity for something, the price typically goes up. So the people with the most money can afford it because there's not enough to go around. And in Chesapeake, that could lead to issues of affordability and lead to events such as emigration for those lower middle income families or residents. And they can leave Chesapeake to go probably somewhere more rural, somewhere like an exurb. All right, part C. Explain one way that Chesapeake's population growth impacts the creation of infrastructure. And so we kind of answered this a little bit in part B, talking about residential facilities in particular. And we can obviously think, using a little bit of common sense, is that if you have a lot of people living in one area, you're going to need a lot more infrastructure to support them. If traffic's getting worse, we see that the response is to expand lanes. And fun fact, we've actually seen that traffic continues to get worse the more lanes you add to a road. And I'm not going to go into depth about that, but that's a cool phenomenon that you should research. So some sample responses we could look at here. As the population grows, there's increased need for transportation infrastructure, such as roads, highways, public transit systems, such as buses, to accommodate more vehicles, to reduce traffic congestion, and to allow residents in the area to just get from place to place, such as their jobs. They have to make the commute somehow. Population growth will lead to the expansion of utilities and public services, so water, sewage, electricity, gas. All of those are services that would need to be expanded to accommodate and reach the entire populations, as well as the new commercial developments that will open up as well. The increased population drives the development, of course, of new schools, healthcare facilities like doctors' offices, dentists, hospitals, emergency services to support the growing community, maintain a high standard of living, and maintain the health of the community. The expansion of residential areas as well as commercial development due to population growth requires improvements in stormwater management, drainage systems, and flood control to prevent any environmental damage as well as property damage as well. And I didn't really touch on a lot of environmental damages in these parts, but there's a lot you could have talked about. The main one that I obviously thought of was anything to do with storms or drainage or flood control. Those are big things in the suburbs, is maintaining flood control, even in urban areas, because they build roads and sidewalks that are impermeable, so water doesn't seep through the ground. It has to run off somewhere. So putting in maybe permeable systems or roads can lead to increased flood control and to prevent floods in a boomburb or suburb or wherever you put them in. Part D, explain one reason for why there's a rise in interregional immigration from Norfolk to Chesapeake. So if we look at the map here, I'll go back a little bit. We look at the map here at the beginning, we can see that Norfolk is probably the main city. It is the main city. And then Chesapeake's kind of out here. It's the boomburb. We have a beltway that surrounds Norfolk. So this kind of follows the galactic city model. Pretty interesting. And so Norfolk is our main city here. So we need to keep that in mind when answering this part here. So essentially, why are they moving from Norfolk to Chesapeake? Why are they moving out of the central business district? Why are they moving out of the urban area to a less urban area? And we can think of the concept of suburbanization. So what are some draws to suburbanization? So the rise of migration from Norfolk to Chesapeake can be attributed to the availability of more affordable housing in Chesapeake. In cities, we see that the housing costs are more expensive and you get less space in urban areas. And so people are going to be attracted by lower property prices and rent compared to a more urbanized city, such as Norfolk, Virginia. I actually don't think I'm saying it right. I think I'm saying it different every single time that I'm saying the city. So yeah, I'm not from Virginia. As a boomburb, Chesapeake provides more job opportunities and economic growth, attracting people from nearby city who are seeking better employment prospects in a rapidly developing suburban area. You have a lot of people in a city that can lead to a lot of competitiveness for jobs. Chesapeake's increasing suburban development and improved infrastructure. So we have, of course, the development of infrastructure that's a lot newer. We probably don't have as new or developed infrastructure in the main city that's close to Chesapeake, Norfolk. I think I said it right that time. And so that can make it a very attractive destination for families and individuals that want a higher quality of life. And that may not be as available in a more urbanized area. And of course, we see that suburbanization of Chesapeake offers more space in a quieter environment. We typically see that crime rates are lower in boomburbs and suburbs as well. And that can be appealing to residents who are in that city that have a lot of noise from cars. There's a lot of crime going on. You don't have a lot of space to do whatever. You can't buy a single family home, certainly in the central business district. And so they could see it Chesapeake as a more peaceful place, a less crowded place to live. And they could also keep their economic opportunities in Norfolk. They could work there because they can travel on the interstate as well. They can keep their jobs, or they can still commute there if they want to for an event. Part E, explain one reason for why residents of Chesapeake would have strong economic ties to the city of Norfolk. So I kind of touched on that in Part D here. So we see that a lot that these interstates develop and beltways develop in galactic cities in the United States because people still work in the inner city or they work on the edge cities, but they live in the suburbs or the boomburbs here. So we can say that Chesapeake residents may rely on Norfolk for access to special services like healthcare, education, or financial services. A lot of big banks could be located in the major city as well, hospitals, colleges as well, which are more abundant, they're more developed due to the urban infrastructure and the regional significance. We can say that residents could live in Chesapeake but commute to work in Norfolk or the edge cities, and that can contribute to a strong economic link between the two cities as they are interconnected economic zones here. So you live in Chesapeake, but you work in Norfolk. We see that a lot in cities in the United States. Chesapeake residents may engage in shopping, entertainment, or cultural activities in Norfolk. Maybe they have certain stores that are more specialized. I'm thinking of the central place theory. So we have stores that have higher thresholds and higher ranges, maybe that have more expensive goods. So people may travel to Norfolk for those expensive goods. And that can create a variety of commercial establishments and businesses, as well as entertainment venues, cultural institutions as well, like museums, and that can strengthen the ties between the two cities. Part F, explain one way that devolution, so we're going back to Unit 4 a little bit, can be applied within Virginia facilities to accommodate the needs and concerns of those and boomburbs like Chesapeake. So we're looking at how is devolution applied in Virginia to address concerns in boomburbs such as Chesapeake. So first off, what's the definition of devolution in this context? So the definition of devolution in this context is the transfer of power from high to low governments. And we know that the United States is a federal government system. So power is shared between the regional and national governments. Here in the United States, we have the state governments, and then the counties also have county governments as well here. So we have a little bit of wiggle room here and what we talk about when discussing devolution within Virginia. And I think since we're talking about within Virginia, I'm going to be thinking of state to local, but I don't think it would have been a huge problem if you went from federal to local or federal to state as well. But I think you should have tried to stick with state to local devolution in this example here. So this is a little long, but I'll break it up. So devolution can provide local control to Chesapeake. We just established that. And you could say, and you could do something specific. You could have said zoning and land use decisions. It's saying one way, so it's really asking for an example here. So saying just devolution can provide local control. Yeah, in what way though? You have to be a little bit more specific than that. And in this example, we're talking about land use decision or zoning. Zoning just determines where things are built, how things are built. It's another land use concept here. So this would allow Chesapeake to manage its rapid growth. So they can use the land accordingly to support the incoming population. So they can determine where they need to build residential facilities, where businesses need to go, where industrial areas need to go, where infrastructure should go, where roads can go, where schools can go, where healthcare facilities can go, where all of those can go to support the needs of their population. And nobody's going to know the needs better than people living in Chesapeake. And so that ensures we're meeting the local needs and concerns. All right, here's another one. It's a little long as well. Chesapeake can receive greater authority over education policy. So they could tailor their educational programs and infrastructure to the people within Chesapeake, to the unique needs of the growing population. And that can include increased funding for certain schools or increased funding for all the schools, or maybe even decreased funding as necessary. Or it can lead to specialized programs. Maybe there's a lot of English as a second language students there. So they're going to increase programs for English as a second language. So that's just another example of devolution being applied within Chesapeake. Let's look at some more. By decentralizing public health and safety decisions, so we're looking at healthcare, we're also looking at safety. You can think of law enforcement as a branch of that. Local governments can address specific healthcare concerns. Maybe there's a certain sickness that's going around Chesapeake compared to other parts of Virginia. Local governments can respond accordingly, and the state may not even address it because it's affecting one area. But if it's affecting an entire community, that local government may feel more obligated to address those concerns and those issues. We can also see that there's just challenges from population growth as well. Not every part of Virginia is growing at the same rate. Chesapeake's growing at a significant rate. So the local area can increase the services at the healthcare services. They can increase emergency response system, put in new fire stations, more EMS stations, and that allows them to run the city in a more effective and efficient manner. Devolution can give Chesapeake more control over transportation infrastructure, like public transit routes, road development as well, and that can alleviate any traffic congestion that's been caused by the increased population. It can also improve connectivity to different parts of the Boomburb or to the major city, because that's Norfolk and that's located pretty close, and people are going to be commuting to Norfolk and Chesapeake probably pretty frequently. All right, last part G. Describe how Chesapeake's growing status as a boomburb impacts the redistricting process here. So let's just think about it. Chesapeake is growing in population, and districts within a state have to have the same population. So we could probably see the establishment of new districts within Chesapeake, and these districts are going to be smaller because the people are going to be more concentrated in an area. So let's use that to answer this question. So the population growth can lead to redrawing district boundaries, okay, to ensure equal representation in elections. This is kind of the broad answer. That would be fine. You get a point if you said the stuff in this part here. And that can increase the political influence in Chesapeake as well. You could say that gerrymandering would result as well. District lines are manipulated to favor certain political groups or interests. We could say that there's increased local representation because we have more districts around Chesapeake. We also say there's more seats being created as well to reflect the growing population group. It's a proportional representation system. So the more population you have, the more seats you have. Redistricting could create new districts that address the needs of Chesapeake's suburban growth, and that can distinguish it from older areas in other areas of Virginia. So what are some takeaways from this FRQ? What are the key terms we discussed here? A boomburb. These are rapidly growing suburban areas that have characteristics of urban centers, but also maintain a suburban status. We also talk about devolution, which is the transfer of power and responsibility from a central government to local authorities. So that's a top-down approach, and we see that it addresses regional needs more effectively. We also talk about redistricting. This is the process of redrawing electoral district boundaries, often after population changes. We usually do it after a census to ensure fair and equal representation. Now, what are some of the commonly confused topics here? Boomburbs are primarily defined by rapid population growth. Edge cities are characterized by the economic and commercial developments that arise in suburban areas. So what does that mean? Boomburbs have a lot of population growth. There's a lot of residential facilities as well as some economic centers and businesses as well. Edge cities aren't as big on the residential facilities. Edge cities are located along the beltway surrounding an urban city. So they're going to have a lot more job opportunities and a lot more businesses and industry and maybe a little bit less residential facilities. People who work in the edge cities typically will live in the suburbs or the boomburbs. And so we think of the edge cities are on the beltway. Boomburbs are going to be a little bit further away. The location of boomburbs is going to be further from the city along the beltway. And then after that, we're going to have the exurbs that are farther than the boomburbs. These are going to be more rural, less businesses, and just particularly residential facilities. Interregional immigration. We see that prefix inter, and that prefix inter, I-N-T-E-R, means movement of people between different regions, not within. That's intra, that prefix intra, T-R-A. Intra-regional migration is movement within the same region. So if I'm moving between different cities, that's interregional immigration. If I'm moving somewhere within the same city, that's intra-regional migration. What about some concepts here? The rapid growth of boomburbs will change the demand for infrastructure to accommodate growing populations. So if you have a lot of people coming in, you're going to need new roads, you're going to need new schools, you're going to make sure that the utilities can reach everyone. You're going to have increased expansion of public services. Boomburbs will impact economic development and job markets and social structures in both suburban and urban areas. With all that population growth, they're going to have maybe more political influence and more cultural influence. And Chesapeake, the growing population and its unique needs may prompt devolution within the state of Virginia, and that allows the local government to have more control over zoning, resource distribution, and development. Chesapeake's population growth may lead to redistricting within Virginia, and that can alter political boundaries and potentially increase its political influence due to its rising population. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really does help me out, and it costs $0. I have some free resources for you in the description down below if you'd like to use them. If you have any AP Human Geography related questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below the video or send me a message on Discord. I'll see you guys in the next video, though. Adios.